Kelly in Iran, thanks for waiting. You're on with Don and Matt.
Hi, Dan. Hi, Matt.
Hi.
How are you? I'm sorry about my voice. It's a bit annoying.
Oh, it's fine.
Okay. I wanted to ask you. I've been looking into Matt's arguments against the causal argument for God's existence.
Okay.
And first of all, before I delve into that, the question that you raised just before answering my call, why would God create anything? It's a very interesting question, and I think I can offer an answer, at least from the Muslim perspective, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I mean, here's the thing. At least in the version of Islam that I believe in, which is basically Shiaism, it's that God. I mean, even the Christian perspective on God, that is, He loves people. God doesn't love. He doesn't have emotions. He doesn't have feelings the way humans do. And that definition of God really troubles me. God is perfect, sure. And the way I see it is, it's in His perfection that led Him to create people. We call it emanation. It's when God emanates being into existence.
Okay, so I'm curious as to how you know a God exists, how you know a God is perfect, and how perfection involves emanating beings.
Okay. So basically, the argument goes as follows. First of all, because we see that everything around us exists, and you exist, and Dan exists. Don, sorry.
It's all right.
That alone, based on the principle of sufficient reason, allows us to conclude that there has to be an explanation for why everything exists.
I would agree in the sense that if we begin with the assumption that everything that's part of a causal chain has some cause that preceded it, that it is reasonable to conclude that any observation has some explanation, not necessarily in the way that we might always think about it, because sometimes what we want to ask is, well, why is it this way as opposed to another way? And the explanation is it couldn't have been any other way. But even using that, observing that people exist doesn't mean getting to the point where we recognize there must be an explanation doesn't mean that explanation is God.
Oh, I mean, I see your point, but here's the thing. I mean, that entity.
How do you know it's an entity?
I mean, I'm using entity. You're right. That's a very good question. I'm using entity as a placeholder for something that I don't know, just for now.
Okay. If we would agree that you don't know, then how can you possibly?
Not yet.
How can you believe that there's a God as the most likely probable explanation that you don't have?
I'm reaching that point.
Okay.
Basically, what I wanted to say is that entity, which is for now, let's agree that it's something I don't know. It's not even a something. That entity has to have been one entity. At least we can agree on the fact that it's one.
No.
Why not?
Because if somebody said, what's the explanation for the Atheist Experience TV show? And somebody could argue that it's me. They'd be wrong. There's a ton of people that are involved in it. There's people on the other side of the wall. There's a long history to this. It wasn't just a single person. Now, we may get back to a point where there was one person in a discussion who said, hey, let's do a TV show. It was, but my understanding is that for this, it was Joe Zemecki and Don Rhodes and some others talking about it. But it would be wrong to just assume that it's one thing. Just like when a fire starts, there's a fire triangle, which involves heat, oxygen, and fuel. It's not just one thing that is contributing causally to fire. It necessarily is three things. So if there's something that we don't know what the explanation is, I don't know what justification you could ever have for claiming it's necessarily one thing.
Because, okay, that's a very interesting thing regarding the fire, that it requires three things. because here's where I'm coming from. I see things that two causes can never result in the exact same thing in the exact same way. Do we agree on that, or?
No. Well, it depends on what you mean by exact same thing. For example, going back to, so first of all, the fire, I still think that's a roadblock to what you just said. But if I roll a die and it comes up a 4, and I roll a die again and it comes up a 4, you could say, well, if we really look down and get, kind of reductive on this, these things happened at different times, and so everything about the physical universe was slightly different, et cetera. But the truth, the resolution at which we can reasonably define what happens to a die when you roll it is about the shape of the die, the surface that it's hitting, the physics, and it doesn't necessarily hit the same spot. But if you look at the result of it rolled a 4, that can arise from a multitude of different individual actions, right?
Of course, but my point is that there's only one hand throwing the die.
How do you know? I can throw it with 2 hands.
That's exactly what I don't.
And the
agree
table
with.
can have various.
Don and I can hold onto the die together and let go at the same time. Now there's 2 of us dropping the die, and it requires both of us to let go in order for that die to drop.
But it requires only one person for it to drop.
No, if I'm holding on to the 2 and 5, and Don's holding on to the 6 and 1, and I let go, that dice doesn't drop because Don's still holding it. And if Don lets go and I don't, the die doesn't. What do you mean exactly? I'm literally showing you that here's something that would require 2 individual agents to act in order for this to happen, and you're saying exactly it's one person.
I agree. I mean, that point is completely fair. My point is that you can't hold the die in a sense, and this on 2 ends of it.
Yes, you can. What the? I can do it with the phone. Look, there's this side. There's this side, which is a little long for me. Then there's this way, and if I hold here and Don holds, no, not the same ones. Yeah, like opposite. Now, when I let go, the phone doesn't fall, and if Don lets go, the phone doesn't fall. You can do the same thing. This is this is an elongated cube, essentially, or.
These are really bad magic tricks, Matt.
Yeah, they're the worst, but I'll show you a better one later.
Okay.
All right. So, what do you mean you can't hold a die by the ends? When I can demonstrate to you that we can. If I had a die here, I'd show you with a die, but I was hoping that my phone, which is a good approximation of a die, would be sufficient.
I hope she can see us, but... Hey, sorry.
No, sadly, I can't see you.
Oh, my apologies.
It's okay. Can I give another example? Because I think that one would be fair.
Okay.
Basically, for example, if you're shooting a bullet at a window, if you're shooting, let's say, 2 guns, okay, and both bullets hit the window at the same exact time, the window will break. So you can say, sure, that the bullets, both of them, caused the window to break. But the problem arises when we think that there's no problem. It's just the fact that the 2 bullets had to exist in 2 different positions relative to the window.
Yes,
they couldn't.
And they break the window in 2 different locations.
Sure, but they don't break it in the exact same way.
That's what I just said. They break it in 2 different locations.
Exactly. So they don't break it in the same way.
So
they
what?
Break it together, sure.
So what? I don't even know why you came up with an example of 2 bullets. See, this is like the guy who tried to point to the things that were good in the Bible as a way of avoiding talking about the things that are bad. I can shoot a single bullet at a window and it'll break a window. I don't need two for that.
Exactly.
So why would you come up with an example that doesn't require 2 as if it's a refutation of an example that does require 2?
Because this is a case where this is how the universe must have came about. And this
whoa.
It's a big leap.
How do you know how the universe must have come about? Because we're still working on that.
I mean, because here's the thing. The universe is a fact, isn't it?
There is a universe.
You and I are in agreement that the universe exists.
And I really hope we agree on that.
Do we agree that we don't know how or why the universe exists?
Of course.
Then why did you just pretend to know how or why the universe exists? If we don't know how or why the universe exists, you can't claim that the universe must have come from a single thing.
because of the fact that the universe couldn't have come into existence.
That's not a fact. That's an assertion by you. You just acknowledged that we don't know how or why, and now you're going on to make claims about what you know about the origin of the universe.
I can start to see your point.
This is one of those things where it's our intuitions and our frustration with not knowing, where we look at this and we go, oh, well, of course, if the universe had a beginning, it must be something like this. And yet we also have to acknowledge that we don't know that we can't explore that we don't currently have evidence for it. The best thing we have is sort of, currently we have the modern Big Bang cosmology, but that doesn't explain the how or why. It's more of an explanation of what. And right now we can't even get back beyond the Planck time.
And there are whole realms of physics that defy intuition and our armchair understanding.
Yeah, but I think those are magical thinking.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I am a big fan of falsifiability and demonstration, and the fact that you have a model that can make reasonable predictions is neat. But it reminds me of essentially like Newtonian physics, which it works well in the context in which it works, and yet it does not accurately describe what's going on at the universe at another resolution.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so until we're able to investigate and explore the universe at the particular resolution that we want to provide an explanation, it would be a mistake for us to make any kind of claim about what the nature of that explanation might be. For example, the origin of the universe, it could be the Abrahamic God. It could be the God of some other religion. It could be some sort of multiverse thing. It could be universe creating pixies. It could be, and I'm not saying it, let me correct this. I'm not saying those are actual epistemic possibilities. I'm saying that those are things that we cannot rule out. And so if I have 20 things that I can't rule out, and potentially an infinite pool of things that I know nothing about, not only can I not say that the answer must be one of the 20 things that I can't rule out, but since I can't rule out the things that I don't know, it would be a mistake for me to say that it must be one of these 20. That's the arrogance that we do. This is why the argument from ignorance, which is I'm right until you prove me wrong, and the argument from personal incredulity, which is I'm going to stick with this explanation because I can't think of anything better, are both more about us and our failure to recognize the limits of our understanding and our discomfort with saying, I don't know. And so when somebody says, ask me, what's your explanation for the origin of the universe? I don't have one. Well, doesn't that make you uncomfortable? Yeah, it really does. I'd love to know. But the difference is I'm not willing to pretend that I know, and I'm not willing to make claims about the nature of what the cause might be when I have to recognize that I don't know anything about the nature of what the cause might be.
And how can you live with that?
Because
there's a lot of things we don't know, and there's a finite amount of time.
Because I'd rather live being intellectually honest and open to explanations that are supported by evidence than to say, wow, I don't want to live in a world where I don't know where the universe originated, so I'm going to make something up. The comforting lie that we tell ourselves is not, yes, people do that because they're just comforting. But your question of how can you live with that? If you pretend that you have the answer, you stop looking for the answer, and you mire the world in ignorance forever. And while it may be a comforting, ignorant lie, it's still a comforting, ignorant lie. And if you stop with that comforting, ignorant lie and say, let's go out and see what we can discover, we may never be able to know what the true explanation of the origin of the universe is. But as soon as we put up that roadblock, it leads us to the temptation to start putting up other roadblocks to things that we might be able to know. When religions pretend to have the answers to things that humans don't know, some people are not satisfied with the comforting lie. And so they go out and explore, and they find out, you know what? The Earth isn't the center of our solar system or the universe. You know what? Lightning doesn't come from Thor, Odin, etc. Sorry, Ocean. All of these things that we'd want to know, anybody can come up with religion that says, here's the explanation. Why do some men like men? What's the explanation for that? Why are some people born intersex? Why do some people have gender dysphoria and ideas like that? Why do some people have lighter skin and some people have darker skin? If we just went with what religions have claimed, we would
be poor.
The world would be devoid of technology, of understanding, of the sort of inspiration that makes you go out and look for answers. When you say, how can you live not knowing that? I don't know how anybody could live without realizing that they don't know it. Life is about this pursuit of finding out and understanding the world. And if you're willing to just take whatever comforting lie somebody offers you, I don't know that you're living. You're existing, you're persisting, but without that sort of curiosity, without this drive to find out what the hell is actually going on, that would be the life that would suck for me.
But my perspective is that, first of all, thank you so much for that. It really made me open my eye on several things.
I'm happy, thank you.
Yeah, but one of the things that I might disagree with slightly is the fact that living with a religion makes you so close-minded. I mean, one of the things you mentioned is gender dysphoria, and I myself have gender dysphoria, as you might have realized.
Yeah.
It is, I mean, in Iran specifically, one of the main things they were against was admitting that gender dysphoria should be treated, and men who feel that their women should be treated, and vice versa. This was an issue in Iran, and it wasn't solved, and it wasn't accepted until recently. But here's the thing: they accepted it. It was something that became, at the end of the day, something that's fine.
But to the extent that somebody's accepted it, wasn't religion a roadblock to preventing this from being accepted much, much earlier? But here's the thing. My perspective is that religion was the thing that made people open-minded about it. It wasn't religion that was against it. I believe that the people were. And the religion helped the people open their eyes, in a sense, to realize that. Because in the Quran itself, it says, you should think. And at the end of the day, that was the thing that made people realize that it's not an issue. What does the Quran say about sexuality and gender? Is it supportive of homosexuality? Is it supportive?
Homosexuality is a different issue. It's not.
Sorry?
It's not gender dysphoria. Homosexuality is not.
I know. I wasn't done.
Okay.
When it talks about homosexuality, I don't think the Quran's in favor. But when we talk about transitioning from one gender identity and expression to another, I don't think the Quran's in favor of that either.
It doesn't say anything about it, actually.
Really? Well,
yeah.
I agree that it probably doesn't use those terms, but
exactly, it doesn't.
But you don't think it talks about the concepts at all?
It talks about. I mean, here's the thing:
what it is to be a man, what it is to be a woman, what those roles are. Because if the Quran was actually okay with someone who was assigned female at birth, transitioning to a man to conform to their own understanding of their gender, then why on earth would we have different roles for men and women in the first place in different positions? If you say men can do this and women can do this, and then someone who was assigned female at birth says, "Oh, I'm going to transition and be a man," and
have more rights.
Now there's no reason to have those roles, where men have rights and women don't. I was assigned female at birth, but I'd like to drive a fucking car without having a male chaperone around me. So I'm going to transition to be a man. I understand that's not what the gender dysphoria is, but what I'm talking about from the model from the Quran, I think the concepts are there, that women are inferior, that they don't have the same rights as men. And so this notion of people, that's not what?
That's definitely not the reason I would transition to a man.
I didn't remotely say that that's why.
Okay, sorry.
Let me back this up, because I'm not talking about the reason that you would. Okay. I'm saying if you have a religious structure that says every man gets these rights and women don't, And yet we're okay with any one of you identifying as either man or woman. That erases the need to have the distinction between the two of them. And I don't think that that the notion of transitioning is consistent with the Quran.
But I don't get that point, honestly, because sure, it does talk about the different roles, but that's only as a social structure. It was talking.
It's all a social structure.
Yeah, so it was only talking about that. It wasn't touching on the necessity of not having or not allowing transitioning. I mean, sure, the roles are there, and that's exactly why I'm transitioning, because my inner self more agrees with those roles than other roles. So the roles are important and they are there. I don't know if that goes against what you said, but I had to make that clear.
Well, we may need to do more research on the Quran, but certainly there's this idea in the United States of from the Christian community that God made you a certain way, and if you think you need to change, then you are wrong, and God is not wrong. There's certainly that idea.
That's horrible. No, in fact, God made you a certain way, and you're willing to change.
Prove it.
What?
Prove God made me anyway.
Hypothetically speaking, right?
I'm not an expert on the Quran, so I'm not going to keep digging in on it. But I find it bizarre, after having so many Muslim and ex-Muslim friends over the years, that anyone could suggest that the Quran is in any position other than directly in opposition to the notion that someone can transition gender. This is a concept that would not even have existed or been broached at the time in the way that we do it now.
Exactly. That's why it has no say on it.
Okay, that's absolutely ridiculous.
Why? The default position is that it's permissible unless stated otherwise, and it's not stated otherwise. Unless someone brings out a verse and explains it in a certain way, then that's a different story.
Okay, so here's a piece of advice. I wouldn't run around in most of the Muslim-led countries suggesting that the Quran is okay with people transitioning gender.
I definitely wouldn't do that. But
and why wouldn't you do it? Would you fear for your life?
No, because the version of Islam that they have is a horrible one.
Oh, they just haven't found the right Islam.
The true Islam problem, right?
Well, that's good.
Yeah, that's why there are different sects.
We know that one.
Yeah, we get that from Christians all the time. So congratulations, you're all engaged in the same sort of confirmation bias batshittery.
But my point was that that in Iran, it's widely understood. We study philosophy, we study ethics, and it's widely understood what the Quran is. It's just for example, in Saudi Arabia.
What is it?
Iran is an unusual country in the education level of the populace, and it doesn't have quite the religious stronghold that other, like say Pakistan or Saudi Arabia has, as far as the strength of the religion and the power of the religion and such is a bit different there.
What this conversation's turned into, so there's a ton of different Christian denominations, and I'll stick largely with what I know. A bunch of gay-friendly churches. Mm-hmm. All over the place. There's one here in town we use on occasion for meeting place, crosses and rainbows all over. The Bible is directly in opposition to homosexuality. There's no...
Of course.
Okay. And so the people who are suggesting that Christianity is compatible with homosexuality are inventing a heresy. Now, I think I'm in agreement with them about homosexuality and rights and freedoms and stuff like that. But they're inventing a heresy, and so there's no way for them to show that they have the right version of Christianity, and let's say some jackass like Steven Anderson has the wrong version, and yet you're calling in to talk about Islam and to say that those other versions are wrong. Well, how do you know yours is right? Because wouldn't it also make sense that you have picked or massaged a version of Islam to conform to what you want it to be?
I don't know.
I don't either. And until somebody gives me a way to know, I'm stuck looking at both of them and saying, you know, it's like, we'll go back to a die roll. Somebody rolled a die in a box, and neither Don or I can see it. Don starts the religion that the die roll was a 2, and I start the religion the die roll was a 5, and we are forever blocked from demonstrating which of us is actually correct, and yet we will fight wars and kill people left and right because I'm convinced that Don is a fucking heretic. How dare you think a 2 could come up? A 2, by the way, is always on the opposite side of a 5 on a correctly standard 6-sided die. So you are on the satanic. See, this is the way this goes. And so to outsiders, we need some way to know how one comes about understanding that their version is correct. And it all gets back to the foundations that we were talking about earlier, where I have no evidence that a God exists. I have no evidence that a God participated in either the beginnings of the universe, the beginnings of the Old Testament, the beginnings of the Quran, any of these things. So quite frankly, I don't give a crap what any of the books say. None of them are authoritative or instructive for me. And when people point to them and say, oh, well, this part of the book is not nearly as bad as the other parts of the book, I mean, we did that earlier with a Christian. So you're basically saying, hey, the Quran doesn't actually speak about trans issues, and since it's not expressly prohibited, then Islam must, in fact, be in favor of transitioning. And yet I bet if you were to go back in time and around the origins of Islam, around the time the Quran was written, and try to explain the concept of transitioning gender, I think that it would be prohibited based on everything else that's in there. It's just that they didn't have an understanding of this to actually prohibit it.
Yeah, it's almost like there's no real mention of lesbianism in the Bible, because I don't think any of the men who wrote it had a clue that existed.
You know, it's like, you know what else isn't in the Quran? Prohibitions against manipulating DNA. Does that mean it's permissible?
No.
Yeah. Now, look, I want to backtrack a minute, Kelly, if I can, because I know that you are in a particularly difficult spot. And when we're on the show, we're having these discussions, and the whole thing is, tell us what you believe and why. And we'll look into this and, is there evidence for this, and is this reasonable? And despite what some people think, my goal isn't necessarily to convince people that their belief is wrong as much as it is to point out why I don't share their beliefs, why it's not convincing for me or us. You are in a much more difficult spot as a transgender person, as a Muslim. You're trying to find your way through all this, and exactly. I want you to know that irrespective of what you believe about a God or Islam or anything else, you are a valued human being with rights, and we are fully supportive of your transition process and who you are as a person, even if you wind up inventing a version of Scientology that is fine with who you are. My concern at the outset of this was when we were talking about, causality and origins and stuff. I just have questions, and I love the fact that one of your questions that I spent the most time on was, how can you live not knowing? That's the thing that most of us are uncomfortable with. And I hope, no matter what your view on religion is, I hope you find a way to safely and happily live your life as the person who you are. And one of the things that is incredibly liberating about not accepting religious claims that don't have evidence behind them is that I'm not in any way bound to them. I'm not beholden to anybody's antiquated ideas about gender. I'm able to actually explore things and come to new understandings of those in the same way that I can explore the universe. I mean, granted, I can't go explore the universe. I'm not
assuming
astrophysicist or an astronaut.
Limited human capabilities.
Yeah, I get your point.
But we are completely in your camp with respect to your life and who you are and what your rights should be and how you should be allowed to live your life. to the fullest as the person that you are. That's
really appreciate
secondary to the God thing. So just because I'm up here in debate mode going, well, that's bullshit and that's bullshit. What about this? What about this? I don't want that to be taken as anything other than an academic exercise, which is actually,
don't
for
worry.
me, that academic exercise, despite the fact that's what we do, it is of secondary importance. I'm a humanist.
I know.
I'm a skeptic, and I'm an atheist. And of those three, atheist is the least important part, because if there's ever evidence for God, that's the part that goes away, but the skepticism and the humanism don't.
That's very inspiring, actually.
Well, hopefully we've helped a bit. I'm going to try to get on to some other calls, but call us back and let us know what's going on. And if you come up with more questions, whether they be academic exercises on causal arguments, or maybe you find something in the Quran that is more supportive of that. At the end of the day, though, even if there was a surah that said, irrespective of the gender assigned to you at birth, all people are free to transition, identify, and express gender in whatever way they want, because gender is just a bunch of BS, at least in the societal context. I mean, nobody's denying that there's not genetic differences between, individuals, but there's probably as many genetic differences between Dawn and myself as there is between, myself and you, or myself and a cis woman, or whatever else.
Yeah.
We kind of did the same thing. Well, I'm not gonna go down another sidetrack, but I get that you think that the one thing you said that bugs me a little bit is that you thought that religion made people open-minded about this stuff. And the reason that sticks with me is the sum total of my entire life's experience, including all of these years talking with people who have different religious beliefs, is I'm not aware of any religion with any sort of significant adherence that encourages open-mindedness. Some of them play lip service to it, and then they set up protective barriers. So Christianity has verses about thou shalt not, or you shouldn't put the Lord your God to the test. God, this is how we get to God works in mysterious ways within Christianity, and why prayer tests fail. But my commandment is put everything to the test. Question everything. Question every answer, every authority. Don't sit there and, it's not like you're mired in questions all the time. It is exercise reasonable doubt and try to make sure that you're not convinced of anything until there's really strong evidential warrant for it.
Yeah.
And that is what open-mindedness is, not thou shalt not. That's not open-minded. You have to live this sort of way. You have to pray 5 times a day. You have to, face Mecca. You have to, wear niqab or hijab or whatever else. These sorts of things. You can't be out. These sort of legalistic, prescriptivist instructions don't ever seem to me to come from a mind that is either open or encouraging an open mind. And I find it fascinating, curious. I'd love to. Send us an email, because I'd love to hear more about why you're convinced that it makes people open-minded.
Honestly, the thought experiment that you gave me made me kind of doubt that.
Well, cool.
When you told me about if I went back in time and told Muhammad, that I described my situation. Yeah, I'm starting to doubt that, honestly.
And Islam being significantly newer, I've talked to Christians before and pointed out, if you grabbed 10 Christians from today that are in different denominations that agree and disagree on different things, and you took all 10 of them back 150 years and introduced them to 10 different Christians from their denominations, if those denominations existed, they wouldn't recognize each other and they wouldn't agree. They wouldn't agree on morality. You look back to the 60s when women were wearing miniskirts and people were like, oh my God, it's the end of the world. And of course, each year the world supposedly gets worse and worse and worse. And yet the stuff I see people wearing into church now would not have been acceptable when I was going to church as a teenager, for people to walk in wearing church. And it's because, hey, wait, the Bible doesn't say anything about what you should wear. Well, actually, yes, it does. You're not supposed to wear mixed fabrics, and you're also supposed to dress humbly, and you're not supposed to put makeup on, and all these other things that are in there. And yet, Christianity has conveniently ignored those. And it's moved forward and is more accepting of some things. But it's not the religion that is making them open-minded. It is the influence of the outside world that says, no, you don't get to tell us what to do anymore. And that seeps in and it corrupts Christianity. It's the reason that all religions are going to die.
Wow.
Long, slow, painful death.
It's going to take a long while. I mean, I've got pretty good job security here, I think, even though this isn't a job.
Not in our lifetimes, man.
Anyway, Kelly, I really appreciate the call. And by all means, email us, keep in touch, let us know how you're doing and you know, where you come out on this stuff. And if you find better arguments, we'd love to hear them.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Before we go to the